let's do it. Welcome everybody. We are bringing you a bunch of videos on trans issues and raising awareness of those things that affect the trans community as part of Trans Awareness Week. It runs from the 13th of November to the 20th of November, so all this week. And yes, we're going to, first of all, we're going to start by talking a little bit about breaking down about what transgender actually means and what it is for those who might not know. And yeah, just give you a bit of an overview. So firstly, we're going to start with talking about why it's important to bring these issues to light, and why it's important to have these conversations. Do you want to kick this off, Danni?
It's important to have these conversations because if something's not working, like whether it's in society or issues aren't being talked about, then it's pretty much forgotten and we're just going to be stuck in the same thing.
Yeah.
So if you've got a problem, you don't talk about it, the problem's not going to go away.
Very true. Okay, so Danica.
Yeah, kind of echoing Danni's thing a little bit. It's just important because, like, obviously this language has been around for ages, but it's still a new thing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So it's just good to make sure that people are aware of it, and just that general education around respecting other people.
Yeah, I was going to be a few echoes about but it's the fact that just just having the courtesy to respect other people's wishes and what they want to do with their choices. But yeah, just about the education of learning about trans and what it is and what it means to people.
And what you can do as well to help the community.
Yeah.
No, totally. Yeah. Biggest echo in the room right now.
Yeah.
Trans people, not many people might not be aware of this, but trans people face much higher rates of discrimination, assault, bullying, homelessness, health care problems and health issues, physical and mental health. Mental health being a really big one. Trans people are about 9 times more likely to commit suicide than cisgender people, and they're about twice as likely to self-harm within their lifetime as well. So the rates are pretty extreme, and there's a lot of reasons why, which we're definitely going to go into as we explore these topics in the coming episodes. And yeah, it's just important to reflect on that and reflect on, the progress that we have made, but also what way we have to go and the little things that anyone can do in their everyday life to make trans people's existence and their journeys a lot easier. So we'll kick it off. Let's do a little intro round of who we are and what our pronouns are.
Yeah. So my name's Danica, and I use she/her pronouns.
I am Taylor and I use she/her pronouns.
Catherine, I use they/them pronouns.
Danni, I use he, him. I've noticed we kind of have like a little evolution. It went from she to he at the end.
Yeah, true.
Little
It's
evolution.
like a gradient, right?
Gradient, that's the word.
So
Gradient.
cool. We didn't even plan that. That was fantastic. Love it. Yeah, so first of all, let's do a little bit of an overview about what it actually means to be trans. Firstly, you might have noticed that we've got some different colours in the room today. We've got white, pink and blue. Those are the trans flag colours. And so yeah, if you ever see those colours in a flag, it's probably the trans flag. And obviously we've got the rainbow flag as well, which is the umbrella of the whole LGBT plus community. But yeah, let's start off with breaking down a couple of concepts that you might not be familiar with. So we've got, first of all, we've got sex assignment at birth. This is probably the one that people are most familiar with. And it tends to be that when a baby is born, the doctor looks at the external genitalia and is like, is it a female, is it male? And then they gender the baby based off that. But there's also a whole section of the community who are intersex. So they actually have a combination of different chromosomes, hormones, gonads, reproductive organs that actually don't fit into one of those two categories. And of course, sex can also be changed as people grow and develop through surgeries and hormone things and Yeah, and so on. So about 1.7% of people are actually born intersex, and lots of other people find out later on in life.
And didn't you say that it's the same kind of ratio as people with red hair?
Yes, it
Yeah.
certainly is. Yeah, so the same amount of people. We've got a redhead right here to prove it.
So that shows you how many, that these people do exist.
They certainly do. Yeah, absolutely. So very right off the bat, you know, there's an age-old argument of you're born female or male. Well, actually, there's actually even a further sex that a lot of people don't know about. And there's a lot of people too who, even if they're not like diagnosed intersex, diagnosed is a weird word, but you know, they've actually had a medical professional assess them as intersex. Lots of people have intersex variations, which can be little things from, you know, if you were born female but you develop facial hair at puberty because of polycystic ovarian syndrome, or you know, just because of your hormone levels, that's an intersex variation. Men, when they, or male bodies, when they go through puberty, tend to have a fair bit of fatty breast tissue which actually develops, and some males don't actually shed that after they've gone through puberty, so they retain fatty breast tissue, which again is an intersex variation. And the next one is talking about gender identity, and this is really about what feels right to you and what you feel like you are actually truly on the inside. We want to discuss this a little bit more in detail.
Yeah, well, as I said before, my pronouns are she, her, so that means I identify with the gender of the sign of birth, so that is the term that Kathy used before, which is cisgendered. So a lot of people, I found that if you're not in the LGBTQ plus community, people who are cisgendered don't actually know that they're cisgender, like they don't actually know that that's the term,
Yeah.
like for their gender. Which again, it just kind of shows the amount, or I guess lack of education around these topics.
Yeah.
Yeah, I find that hard with me because I'm saying I was assigned female at birth, but with my appearance, I don't look like it. But I am.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, I like more dry stuff,
Yeah.
I guess.
But you still identify it
As
as
a female,
woman.
yeah. And some of the older generation and even newer generation have a lack of education of people can do who they want, dress how they want, identify as whoever they want to be. Yeah, I think we just need more education out there.
100%. How about yourself in terms of gender identity?
I echo Tay's statement because I was born here male, but in terms of what I wear whatever I want.
Yeah.
So, but in terms of identity, it's still a he him.
Yeah.
Which is quite jarring for people who don't get it. You know, because clothes are clothes, but the older generation, clothes are still very gendered.
Yes, they are. Definitely. Yes.
So in terms of gender expression, we still have that, you know, this is still predominantly women, this is still predominantly male clothes.
Yeah, definitely echo that. It's like, when it comes to gender identity, it can be very different to actually how you end up expressing to the world, or how you feel comfortable expressing to the world. We all have how we actually feel on the inside, so for me it's non-binary. I don't really identify or vibe with either being a man or a woman. I vibe somewhere in between or somewhere outside of that. Don't know where that is. But yeah, so that comes across for me in terms of just feeling a bit different. And when it comes to my expression, that could be anything. It doesn't actually have to be like a perfect alignment of what society thinks that somebody who is androgynous should look like, or somebody who's masculine or a male should look like, or who's somebody who's feminine or a woman should look like, if that makes sense. Yeah, so definitely there's a breakdown there, and this leads us right and nicely into our next one, which is talking about gender expression, which is really the way in which we present to the world. And the way that we ideally present to the world might not meet society's expectations of how we actually want to be termed, like whether we are she, her, they, them, he, him, man, woman, non-binary, or anything else. I myself tend to float around a lot. I tend to like elements of femininity and masculinity in the way that I dress, and I wear a little bit of makeup from time to time, but I also like heavy brows. I enjoy cute socks and more masculine shoes, but then I'll wear dresses sometimes, and it sort of floats around all over the place. How about yourself? How would you term your gender expression, your ideal gender expression?
Well, as a kid, I was probably labelled a bit as a tomboy, so again, I probably would say I lean more towards the feminine side of things, but again, my general is t-shirt and jeans.
Pretty much going off what I said previously is with expression, I grew up more wearing whatever the hell I wanted because I don't see why clothes should be gendered. They're just clothes anyway.
Yeah.
So in terms of gender expression, I'm just kind of all over the place. Even though I still identify male, but even growing up, because I wore different type of clothing, I was called very feminine, and even though that's not how I felt, clothes are clothes,
Yeah.
Who cares?
Totally. That's a really good point you bring up around being called feminine, even though it's actually not how you feel in terms of your inside. Like, it might be the way that you're expressing or the way that others are interpreting you, but it's not necessarily how you feel. And it's really important to keep that in mind whenever we are actually talking to people, meeting new people, is just because they present a certain way doesn't actually mean that that's going to be their gender identity and how they feel on the inside. Yeah. Do you want to chat about this?
Yes. So when I was younger, I would dress up in like tomboy. I was identified as tomboy. So I was in shorts and singlets and shirts and playing football and like more masculine things. And then I kind of went out of that for a little bit and dressed a little bit more feminine. Feminine? English?
Yeah.
Anyway. And then I just didn't feel right and went back to like dressing more masculine, and so I felt better like, dressing that way and even getting a haircut
Yeah.
to change it all. And yeah, I just feel more comfortable the way I am today.
That's really cool. And that's what it's about. At the end of the day, it's about feeling comfortable in our skin, feeling comfortable in our bodies, and being able to feel the best that we actually can be. I know for me, it's definitely been quite a journey figuring out my gender expression and my gender identity. When I was a kid, I would often just wear the most insane combinations of clothes. I would just be wearing board shorts and like a formal shirt, and I'd just be like makeup, and my hair would be slicked back with gel, and I'd be like, this is cool. I never quite really understood where I fit, and it took me a long time to figure out why that was, as well as to actually develop a style that made me feel really good, that made me feel comfortable, and made me feel like I was really presenting my true self to the world. But there were lots of barriers that stood in the way of that for me, like actually feeling like I was going to be discriminated against, or that people were going to give me weird looks. It has taken a long time to get there. So for the longest time, I did present very feminine, but I definitely wasn't on the inside. So yeah, really important to keep that in mind whenever you're meeting new people. Basically, don't assume from the outside, I think, is the message that we're trying to really, drill home here. As Danica mentioned before, we've got cisgender, which is where society's expectations of what you're going to look like and how you're going to feel on the inside based on what you were assigned at birth matches up. So you were born female, assigned female at birth, and then you now identify as a woman, who is cisgender. Or if you were assigned male at birth and now you identify as a man, you are also cisgender. Transgender, however, is anything that falls outside of that. So whenever there's a difference between what is expected and how you identify, there is a little bit of contention around the intersex community, because they don't always like to be put under the trans umbrella. So that definitely needs its own discussion. But at least for people who are assigned female at birth, assigned male at birth, when it tends to vary, that comes under the transgender umbrella. And we've got our two trans sort of broad categories. We've got trans binary and trans non-binary. do we want to start off with trans-binary? Does anyone want to explain what that is?
Trans-binary is where you're going from one gender to another. So if you were born male, but you now identify as female, that would be trans-binary because you're going from one to the next.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
Yeah.
And non-binary is, you're neither. You don't feel masculine, or you don't feel overly masculine, or you don't feel overly feminine. You're kind of just in the middle,
Go with the flow.
Go with the flow.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's really good to distinguish here too that you've got your sex identity and then you've also got your gender identity. So as Danni mentioned, you've got feminine and masculine being more about your gender identity and your expression. And then you've got your sex identity, so how you feel with your body and your bits, your genitals, the way that it could be anything from like the way that your fat sits, whether you have body hair or not, and all those differences. So somebody might be very okay with their sex and with their body, but just feel at odds with the way they're expressing in terms of their clothing and their hair and their makeup and those sorts of things. Or somebody might want to change both. They might want to change both the way they express as well as their sex. And then some people might just actually want to change their sex and change the way that their body looks, but be okay with their expression. For example, it's not crazy to think that somebody who is a trans woman might enjoy being a bit butch or a bit masculine in their presentation, but they still want a female body. The same as cisgender women can be quite masculine, but can still be respected and treated as a woman. So, I mean, I could kick off with myself. I am totally okay with my physical body. From time to time, I like to experiment with, I do want to experiment with binding, so reducing the appearance of my breasts. But generally speaking, I'm pretty okay with my body. I don't have dysphoria or negative feelings about my body. But it's more about the way that I express and present to the world that I enjoy shifting around in terms of androgyny, masculine, feminine, and all that sort of stuff as well. But other non-binary people do feel at odds with their body and want to start transitioning physically, so going on hormones or, getting corrective surgeries for things that they don't feel actually fit in their body as well. And both are really valid, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree with that.
Great, so now we've gone over basically your transgender 101. You should have a pretty good understanding by now of the three types of spectrums that fit under gender. So you've got your sex on a spectrum of femaleness to maleness. You've got your gender identity on a spectrum of womanness to manness with non-binary in the middle. And you've got your gender expression on a spectrum of feminine to masculine with your androgynous in the middle. And anyone can be any combination of these things. It is super valid, and it's really important. I think this is the take-home message, just not to assume that somebody feels a certain way inside because of the way they look on the outside. So coming up, we're going to be chatting about myths about trans people. We're going to be talking about gender identity and gender expression in a little bit more detail. We're also going to be chatting about non-binary people, pronouns, and language use, so that you can really nail this and make trans people feel supported in your community. We're also going to be talking a little bit about transitioning and what transitioning actually might mean for some people who are transgender. In this, we're going to be talking about trans health and trans mental health and the challenges of being yourself in a cisgendered world as well, because there are unfortunately still a lot of barriers for trans people. And we're going to wrap it up by talking about what you can do to be a better ally and talking a bit about my journey and the journeys of others in the trans community too. So happy Trans Awareness Week. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll chat to you next time. Cheers. It's super awkward. I can't talk in this thing. I need to go get one of those because it is just bugging me so much.